Hello, boys and girls. Today we're going to be focusing on a new grammar skill. Our grammar skill this week is quoting speech. A lot of times when you're reading a text, specifically a narrative text, characters are talking to each other. Their speech is quoted. Sometimes when you're writing a narrative story, you want your characters to speak and have conversation. And then you would want to quote their speech. So after watching this video, I'm hoping you are able to use commas and quotation marks to mark direct speech and quotations from text. Today we're going to be focusing on just the direct speech quotations. There are many quotation mark rules that we have to go over in order to use them properly. The first is that quotation marks are used to show the exact words that someone says. They only go around the words that a character is saying. For example, Mario said, "We got library cards." Notice the quotation marks are only around the words that Mario is saying. Mario wouldn't walk around saying, "Mario said we got library cards." He would just simply go, "We got library cards." Another rule is that the first word of a quotation is capitalized, always. Going back to our first example of Mario said, "We got library cards," we can see that the W and we is capitalized because it is the first word of what he is saying in the quotation marks. Another rule is that the punctuation at the end of the quotation goes inside the quotation mark. So back to our example, Mario said we got library cards. We see that the period goes inside of the quotation marks. It is not way over here. It is inside before the last quotation marks. Another rule is how to use commas. A comma sets off the words that a person says from the words that tells who is speaking. So if we're going back to our example, Mario said are the words that describe who is speaking, and we got the library cards are the words that are actually being spoken. We use a comma to separate the two. Another type of quotation is a split quotation. This is one in which the exact words a person says is broken into two parts. Let's take a look at an example. "We love to read," said Tanya, "so we go to the library every week." You notice that the words describing who is speaking, said Tanya, are in the middle of what she's actually saying. The words that are coming out of her mouth are, "We love to read, so we go to the library every week." But it is separated by said Tanya, the words that describe who is doing the speaking. I'll go over some rules of how to punctuate and properly capitalize a split quotation like this. The first rule is to use your quotation marks. They are used to show each part that the character is speaking. So going back to our example of, "We love to read," said Tanya, "so we go to the library every week," we see two sets of quotation marks. The first set goes around the words being spoken of, "We love to read." The second set of quotation marks go around the other set of words that are being spoken, which are, "So we go to the library every week." Remember, whatever is being said out loud gets quotation marks before and after it. Another rule is to use a comma to separate the first quotation from the words who is speaking, and use a period after the speaker. Let's take a look. "We love to read," said Tanya. We have a comma here inside of the quotation marks to separate the words describing who is speaking, which is said Tanya. And then we have a period at the end. That's after the speaker. And then you'll see that we continue on with, "So we go to the library every week." Remember that the punctuation mark at the end of each quotation is inside the quotation mark. That doesn't change. So whether it's a comma, "We love to read," said Tanya, it is inside the quotation mark. Or if it is a period, "So we go to the library every week," it is inside the quotation marks. The same rule applies for exclamation points and question marks. Keep in mind that the first word of each part of the split quotation is capitalized. Again, whenever you start a quotation, that first word is capitalized. So taking a look at "we love to read," we see that the W in "we" is capitalized because that is the first word starting that quotation. And we see that the S in "so" for "so we go to the library every week" is also capitalized because "so" is the first word in that set of quotation marks. So let's use our thinking questions to really help us understand how to punctuate and capitalize direct speech being quoted. We also refer to that as dialogue sometimes. Mario said, "We got library cards." "We love to read," said Tanya, "so we go to the library every week." Our first thinking question is, what words tell that someone is speaking? Can you find those words? That's right. Those words are the said words. Mario said and "said Tanya" describe to you who is doing the talking. Your next thinking question is, what are the exact words that each person or each character is saying? Can you spot that? Great job. It's the words inside of the quotation marks. We got library cards, we love to read, so we go to the library every week. Once you're able to identify the signal words describing who's doing the speaking and the words that are actually being spoken out loud, it comes very easily. You just want to make sure that a comma sets off those signal words describing who's speaking, as you see here and here. Then you want to make sure that you have a set of quotation marks around the words being spoken out loud, as you see here and here around this sentence that's being spoken out loud, and again here and here after this sentence being spoken out loud, and finally here and here after this sentence is spoken out loud. Don't forget we have punctuation marks inside of the quotations, and we have capital letters to start off each quotation. Let's practice. We're going to rewrite each sentence below with commas and quotation marks. You want to ask yourself, what words tell that someone is speaking? And what are the exact words that a person says? Let's take a look at our very first example. "I read lots of new books," said Elisa. Ask yourself, what are the words that are actually being said out loud? Pause here and answer that. That's right. The words being spoken out loud are, "I read lots of new books." Now this is where we would want to add our quotation marks. Remember, quotation marks go around these set of words that are being spoken out loud. And we also want to make sure we add a comma to separate these words from "said Elisa," the part that describes who's talking. So see if you can think of where your comma and your quotation marks would go. That's right, around the words being spoken and separating these words from the tag "said Elisa." Let's try another. "How many do you read in a year?" Greg asked. Can you identify the part that's being spoken out loud? Is Greg really walking around saying, "Greg asked"? What words are being spoken out loud? That's right. He's only saying, "How many do you read in a year?" So now that we know what he said out loud, where would your quotation marks go? And what type of punctuation would you use inside of those quotation marks to separate his words from the tag specifying who's doing the talking, who is Greg? What do you think? Great job applying your quotation mark rules. We have the quotation marks around what Greg is asking, and we're using a question mark inside of those quotation marks because he's asking a question. Now, normally, there would be a comma where that question mark is to separate the dialogue or the words being said out loud from the tag identifying the speaker. However, because Greg is asking a question here and a question mark is needed, we would replace the comma with the question mark so the reader can fully understand that Greg is asking a question. Let's try another. Elisa answered, "If I don't miss a single week, it's 52. Okay, ask yourself, what are the words that are being said out loud? And what are the words that are describing who's doing the speaking? Pause right here and see if you can identify that. That's right. The words that Elisa is saying out loud are, "If I don't miss a single week, it's 52. Now how are we going to add our quotation marks and our punctuation? And I think there's a capital letter that needs to be in there. Can you apply the rules that we just learned to add a comma, quotation marks, and a capital letter? Pause right here and see if you can do that. That's right. We need a comma to separate Elisa answered, the words describing who's doing the talking, from the actual words that she is saying. We also have quotation marks before and after the words that she's saying, and the very first word gets capitalized. So that I and if got capitalized here. Let's try another. "Camels deliver books here," said Raj. "We're glad to have them." This looks like a split quotation. We're going to need two sets of quotation marks. So can we first identify the words that Raj is saying out loud? See if you can identify those by pausing right here. That's right. The words that are actually being spoken out loud are, "Camels deliver books here. We're glad to have them." But now we need punctuation. We need two sets of quotation marks around the words being spoken. We need a comma to separate the words being spoken from the tag identifying who's doing the speaking. You also need a period after the speaker and a punctuation at the end. Can you do this one? Great job. We have quotation marks around the first thing that Raj is saying, which is "Camels deliver books here." We also have a comma to separate these words being spoken out loud from the tag identifying Raj as the speaker. Then we have a period after Raj, and again quotation marks around the next set of dialogue that he is saying out loud, which is "We're glad to have them." And finally, a last period inside of the quotation marks. Let's try one more. "Do camels carry lots of books?" Nika asked. "How many do they carry?" Boys and girls, this is another split quotation. We need some quotation marks, some punctuation, some capital letters. But let's first identify, what are the words that are being spoken out loud? Pause right here to do so. So I'm hoping that you correctly identified the words being spoken as, "Do camels carry lots of books?" "How many do they carry?" Now, can you apply your capitalization and punctuation rules for quotations to add two sets of quotation marks? One comma, one period, one capital letter, and a question mark? Let's see how you do. That's right. We added Do camels carry lots of books? Nika asked. You see that we added quotation marks around the words that are being said and a question mark here. We put a period after the speaker. We capitalized the beginning of the next quote and added quotation marks around that. Notice how the question marks are inside of the quotations. Wonderful job. Just as in an earlier example, we see that a question mark is located where a comma would normally be. Remember, a comma is what separates the words being said out loud and the words identifying who the speaker is. But in this example, Nika is asking a question, and instead of a comma, we can replace it with a question mark so the reader better understands what's going on. I have another example for you. Camels carry 500 books, Raj answered. Their loads are really heavy. Another split quotation, boys and girls. What are the two parts that are being said out loud? Can you identify that? That's right. He's only saying camels carry 500 books. Their loads are really heavy. But we need two sets of quotation marks. We need some punctuation and we need a capital letter. Can you edit the sentence to add the punctuation marks as well as the capital letters? Pause right here and try. That's right. We have quotation marks around the first dialogue that Raj is speaking. Camels carry 500 books. We have a comma inside of those quotation marks to separate that from the speaker Raj answered, followed by a period. New sets of quotation marks with a capital letter for there because that's the beginning of the quotation, and an exclamation point to end the sentence off inside of the quotation marks. Great job. It's now your turn. In your grammar slides, you have this worksheet here. The directions say, highlight the sentence that is punctuated correctly. I'm going to exit presentation mode so you can see how to highlight. On your slides, you will find that you have multiple highlighting bars there for you to use. They're clickable and they're draggable. For each pair of sentences containing dialogue, you would click and drag this highlighting bar over the sentence that is correct, that's punctuated correctly. It could be this one or this one for the first example. It could be this one or this one for the second example, and so on and so forth. At the end of completing this worksheet, you should have only one sentence highlighted in between each of the blue lines, and you have multiple highlighting bars available to you.